Do you think at that moment she was going to kill you?
I still didn't believe she'd ever do that.
But at some point, your belief changed?
Yes.
When?
When she swung the axe up. And it hit me in the side of my head.
Can you describe the force of that swing?
It seemed with every ounce of her strength.
Were you now concerned for your life?
I knew then that she wanted to kill me.
Welcome back to the official Love and Death podcast. I'm Nancy Miller. Here we are in the final episode, one that ends with a final verdict. And if you haven't watched the episode yet, this is your last chance to hit pause on this podcast, watch episode 7, and come back. Now, on to the verdict. In most true crime stories, the verdict is supposed to be the last word, the long-awaited answer to the question, guilty or not guilty. But this is Love and Death, where the verdict in the Candy Montgomery case, not guilty, well, it just begs more questions, which is why this particular case still captivates and confuses us so many years later. What really happened between Betty and Candy that morning of June 13th, 1980? Was it really self-defense? And what came next for Candy and Pat and Dawn and all the other folks in Wiley, Texas? We'll dive into all of those questions and many more in this final episode of the podcast with series star Elizabeth Olsen, executive producer and director Lesli Linka Glatter, and Texas Monthly executive editor Michael Hall. We can't promise to have all the answers, but in this final episode, we'll uncover a few hidden truths. Starting with the laundry room scene, where, in this final episode, we witness the brutal murder of Betty Gore. Series executive producer Lesli Linka Glatter, who directed this final episode, explains why she wanted to give viewers this unsparing look at the horrific events on June 13th, and why this one particular sequence was the hardest scene she's ever filmed in her 30-plus year career. Just a note here, we will be getting into the graphic details, so please take care while listening. Welcome back to the podcast, Lesli Linka Glatter. It is so great to have you back.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm thrilled to be here. We are at the bitter end.
Lesli, the bitter, brutal end. And when I say brutal,
Yes.
I mean brutal, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you back on the show. Because here, up until this moment, we've seen flashes of a murder. But in
Yes.
episode 7, we see the actual event that takes place in the laundry room in excruciatingly graphic detail. So my first question
Yes,
for you,
it's
Lesli, is why? Why was this scene important to you as a director and executive producer of the series to include in the show?
It was important to me because it really happened. And yes, I know we're only seeing it from one point of view. We're only seeing it from Candy's point of view because she is the one who survived. But it is told in incredible detail in the book Evidence of Love.
Mm-hmm.
And we followed that really in great accurate detail in terms of what happens in that laundry room. And unfortunately, we don't have Betty's point of view. We only have it from Candy's perspective. And it felt really important to have Lizzie Olsen playing Candy on the stand and actually telling the story, which she did in single takes, all of that dialogue. She was truly extraordinary. Like, even without flashing to what actually happened, you see it through her description and her eyes and her way of telling the story also in incredible detail. And I think for me, it was the most difficult thing I've ever shot in my career. And I can tell you, I have blown a lot of shit up.
I mean, you've filmed countless numbers of television episodes of literally explosive scenes. And
Yes.
This is the hardest one you've ever done.
Without a doubt. Because, first of all, it's true. It's two women, two mothers, two housewives in this tiny space. And it was brutal. and emotional and intense. And as a director, of course, my job is to protect my actors and make it the safest possible set to shoot in. But nonetheless, it was a really intense scene. And we choreographed it. I choreographed it with the stunt doubles. I choreographed it with the actors so they knew beat by beat, moment by moment, what was going to happen. They knew we had storyboards plastered all over so they could look and see visually what the shot we were doing, what the next shot was going to be, and where we would end. It was so intense. And these two incredible actors, Lily Rabe and Elizabeth Olsen, just inhabited the moments completely. And that made it even more bone chilling.
So let's just break this down a little bit, because I think when we hear about this story, and this happens a lot in true crime and in true crime dramas, you hear this kind of sensational two women in acts and only one, two go in, one comes out. But Lesli,
Yes.
you have a responsibility both to your actors and then to the real
Yes.
folks involved to tell this in a way that is true. But what does that mean? So talk to me about how you start thinking about this.
Yes, well, I didn't want this to be exploitational in any way. I think something I must have cracked open for Candy, inside of Candy, for that to happen. I mean, I can tell you, I picked up a real axe and it's heavy to swing that thing 41 times. Something had to have happened to her. I don't know if we'll ever know what that was, but this is not an easy feat. And the fact that she kept doing it over and over again, which I think Lizzie does in such a way that it's terrifying and heart-wrenching
Yes.
for both her and Betty. I think Lizzie walking out of that room covered in blood was, I don't know if I'll ever forget it. Lizzie, again, is this kind of actress who allows you in very deep. It's almost like you can travel deep inside of her eyes and feel something about how we mere mortals, we human, feel and think. And when she walks out of that room, I think she's as stunned as the audience is.
And I think part of what that scene does in the laundry room is that it really pushes us to recognize you are not sanitizing what happened for us. And to be responsible as a creator, you have to show us the brutality of this event. Not to explain it, but for us to see the
No.
brutality of that event.
That felt important in telling this story because, and in no way did we ever want to vilify the victim, because oftentimes in true crime drama, like you set up the victim who deserved this. This is so not the case in any way, and we definitely tried not to vilify anyone, but not to glorify anyone or let anyone off the hook.
Let's talk about the amount of time it took to pull this scene together, and how do you know when you've got what you need as a director?
Oh, well, that's the same in any scene.
Okay.
Like you have to be watching, very carefully, and you have to trust your actors and your instincts when you're sitting there watching that you have all the moments you need. Now, part of that is very technical. I obviously shot listed every shot, so I knew exactly what I needed to cut the scene together. I storyboarded it so there were pictures of each shot and how long it would go on. And between those two things and watching the actors do the scene, I knew that I had what I needed.
So there are some really specific moments that I'm almost reluctant to talk about because they're so brutal, where an axe goes into the head of Lily Rabe's, I'm saying character, but why so graphic?
Well, that is as it was described. That was what you would have thought would have killed Betty. You know, Betty kept coming at her, or so described by Candy, and it was the first huge swing. You know, she had hit her in the back of the neck, and then this was the one that you would have thought would have taken her out, but it didn't. As she described, Betty got back up again, you know, and Candy kept going, you know. But that was the end of the first day of filming because we had to put an appliance on her head.
So how many days total did it take for you to film this?
It was 2 days, 2 very emotional, gut-wrenching days. That was what was necessary to shoot that scene. And to not, you know, in that kind of scene, it's very delicate. You don't want to rush anything where 2 people have any sort of contact where someone would possibly get hurt. Safety is everything. So you want to be sure that you've taken it and divided it into enough sequences. You have to shoot the stunt doubles doing certain things, you know, and then the real actors doing those same movements. So it's a big planning process to be sure that first of all, you're doing it all safely. You're hopefully telling the story well, and you are being very clear with what is necessary, and you're not shooting more than that. You're shooting what is necessary.
Now, we know from the book and from the witnesses who saw Betty's body that it was one of the worst things that anyone had ever seen. Now,
Ever.
did you put it on yourself to look at the pictures from that?
We certainly wanted to be clear. It was horrible. And anyone who walked into that room and saw Betty lying there, I think, was probably shocked and stunned and horrified. But there was a limit as to what I felt comfortable doing.
On the one hand, I understand when people are concerned about depicting violent incidences for entertainment. This idea
Yes.
that other people's tragedy, when it's our entertainment, we have to be really thoughtful about how we consume it. But I
Yes.
also understand, Leslie, why this production might think it's important for us to show the brutality so that it's not taken lightly.
It's a very tricky feeling, I think, with how you feel about her. And that was part of the exploration. Like, she did a horrible act. There is no question about it. You cannot let her off the hook for that. But I still care about her as a character, as a person, as a very flawed human who snapped. So it's a very tricky thing because I think you do like her as a character. And yet there's no way to validate or even really begin to understand her actions.
One of the details that sticks with everyone who hears about this case, and it's a detail that you shoot really well that's in the series, is the baby.
Yes, it's one thing that is so upsetting to any parent that little Bethany was left in her crib crying. And I think Candy was in shock. I think she, again, tried to almost pretend that it didn't happen, almost will the horror away and go about her day. And I don't think she probably forgot about Bethany. She couldn't face the horror of what she did. And that was part of Bethany being there. I think when Alan called her that night and she said, "Do you want me to go over and check on her?" I mean, what would she have done if Alan had said, "Yes, will you go over and check?" I mean, she knew what had happened.
Yes.
And yet I think she hoped that what she was saying was the truth. She prayed that it was the truth, but of course it wasn't.
Now, Leslie, let's get into another detail in the case and in Candy's testimony that's so important in understanding a possible motive, and that's the shh. That
Yes.
she, in Candy's telling, that Betty emits, and that becomes a trigger based on childhood.
I don't want him. No, I don't want him. Shh. I don't want him. I don't want him.
Now, you are orchestrating this scene. How do you interpret Betty's shh in the actual incident?
I think it was a very visceral action. And until you are with Candy in Dr. Faison's office and he kind of unpacks what happened when she was a child, and Candy goes through she got cut, she was taken to a hospital when she was 6, and she was in pain and screaming in the hospital ward, and her mother kept trying to calm her down because the behavior to the outside world, how Candy was presented, was more important than anything else.
Right.
And that was enforced, her mother enforced that action. So more than how she was perceived to herself, it was how everyone else saw her.
Right.
She judged herself in the light that everyone else saw her in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, to me, in some way, explains her behavior after. That moment of Betty raising her hand to her, both hands, and saying, shh. Whether that was the inciting incident, whether it was something else, no one will ever know that. But I think what Lily did physically in that moment was powerful. And I think it gave Lizzie, the actor, something to work with in terms of what ensued afterwards.
I mean, in the way that Lily Rabe plays this character, it's almost a please stop, or like a death,
Yes.
almost like a death rattle. Like we've gone beyond this point, and Betty's maybe saying, let's stop. And
Yes.
Candy hears it as, this is not gonna end the way that that anyone wants it to.
Don't silent me.
Yeah.
I cannot be silent. I must be heard. And again, did that trigger something? Is it a dissociative reaction, which is what Dr. Faison called it?
Right.
And she just split off from herself, and until it was over.
Well, there's this touch of foreshadowing. I think it's in episode 2 when she's in front of Alan at the diner, and he's
Yes.
going, and she says, "Don't." She does this finger wag, "Don't shush me," and you're thinking,
Yeah.
Candy, I think we should end it.
Us end it? Us? No. What? No.
Okay.
No, but now you're being unfair. Stop.
okay.
Do not. No. Hey, do not me. You cannot just squelch another person and their emotions. Do not me ever.
Well, it's the first time in the show you see another color in Candy, because Candy is so much the belle of the ball, and what you see on the surface is very different than what you see underneath. And I think that is the complexity of Candy, is that she was not what she appeared to be. And it was something about that time in that community, because the world had changed all around. I mean, the 60s had happened,
Right.
But it's almost like this small town in small town America, it was a much more protected, traditional community. And she had a hole inside of her, that was a mile wide, that she did not know how to fill, did not have the resources to fill that. And she made a lot of choices that ended up in something tragic.
did you have to have conversations with Elizabeth Olsen, who understand it's a total pro, but is there anything where you're like, okay, it's Lily Rabe, this is, she's gonna be fine? Is there any conversations that you guys have like that about people to make
Oh,
sure
well,
that this true crime stuff is heavy,
Oh, God, yes. I mean, we talked about it on every level, emotionally, physically, all of it. And actually, I think Lizzie would probably say Lily was the one going for it. And she was worried because she was pregnant. Lizzie didn't want to hurt her. And she was like, no, Lily went for it. And therefore Lizzie went for it. And it was really intense. And of course, I had, amazing stunt doubles who, anything that I only had the actors do things that were essential. I didn't want to take any chances with pregnant Lily.
Of course.
But they did a lot of it, I should add. They wanted to and did.
One of the most remarkable moments in this final episode where, the verdict has been announced and Candy goes back to the house to say goodbye to Alan.
Oh, God. Yes.
So I just wanted to come by and say goodbye.
Okay.
Also, Alan, I'm sorry for everything that happened. I never meant hurt you.
Me too. I'm sorry too.
Betty and I, we were good friends. She was a good person. And we were a lot alike in some ways, just a good person. Anyway, I wish you a good life, Alan.
Yeah, I wish you a good life too.
Just talk to me about your feelings and approach to that final scene.
I think it's a very delicate one. And I feel like for Candy, knowing that, she had wanted to go back to her normal life and said to Pat, once I'm found innocent, we'll just go back to our life. And he said to her, you will never be innocent. The best it can be is you'll be found not guilty. And that is really true. She will never be innocent. And I think the reality dawning that there will be no normal life in that town ever again, and that they had to leave Wiley to go someplace else and start over. And I think there was something deep in her that she couldn't leave without apologizing to Alan and basically saying, I never intended to do this. And, Alan doesn't say hardly anything, but my feeling is that he was glad that she came. However simple his response was, that did it end a chapter? No, probably not. You can never say I'm sorry for something like this. It's too big. But I think it was essential that she do that.
And I think the thing that's in Love and Death that's key to that, that resonates for those who've been following it for 7 episodes, that it's a big murder, but still in a small town. And it's the small town way to say goodbye is you tie up your loose ends and then you get in your station wagon and you're on the road.
Yeah. And I think that was essential to do. And again, Kristen Ritter playing Sherry, she's the one left standing. She's the one there, as a friend saying, I love you and accept you for who you are in all your flaws.
So when people see this final episode and someone sees you, getting a cup of coffee somewhere and they're going to ask you, Leslie, what really happened? What really happened? What are you going to say?
I certainly couldn't say this is what really happened because it's so clearly from one person's point of view. But I hope it illuminates something about the human condition and the complexity of human beings, human nature. Again, I think it's a story people have gone back to because it is truly inexplicable. It is hard to comprehend. And those kind of stories we keep wanting to explore.
And you and the cast and David E. Kelley and the rest of the team have done it beautifully. So it has been my sincere pleasure to follow along on this journey. And I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to go deep into this final episode with you on the final episode of the podcast. Thank you so much, Lesli Linka Glatter.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Nancy. Thank you.
So what does series star Elizabeth Olsen really think about this not guilty verdict and the unorthodox legal defense that set Candy free? Well, it's complicated, and that's exactly the way Olsen likes it. Here to talk more about the final episode and her take on Candy's fate is Elizabeth Olsen. Elizabeth Olsen, welcome back to the Love and Death podcast.
Thank you for having me again.
It's great to have you back. Okay, we know Candy was happy with the verdict of not guilty, but what's your personal take on how the trial played out?
I think for me, the stretch with the shh part of the trial, that doesn't work well for me, practically speaking. I don't know how you can use that in your defense. What I, from like just trying to step outside of it as much as I can, what I never understood, number one, is that if it were self-defense, the very practical thing of why didn't she call the police immediately and just be honest? So I don't understand that. I don't know what people logically are thinking in that kind of terror, fear. I can only imagine it doesn't feel like real life. So the adrenaline, I have no idea what goes on through someone's head and that kind of insane experience that's so hard to understand. And so the only thing I can think of, because I just don't understand why you don't just call the police the moment you get home or you use that phone or whatever, is that I just don't know what that experience would feel like. And I genuinely think that she thought it would just go away. It's hard for me to assume that she knew where their axe was in their garage, like those kinds of things. It's just, there's certain logical things where it kind of only makes sense in the way that she presented it. And I think if people did a better job figuring out a different version of the story, they could have tried to present that, but they didn't. It's really hard to imagine another outcome or scenario than what the survivor tells, and that's infuriating to us sometimes. I do think that there is too much mystery for us to like have peace with it and move on from it. And I also think these are just you and me. These are just everyday people. These aren't sociopaths, or you might call them. You might think they are based on their actions. They might be diagnosed by someone today. I don't know. But these aren't people who have had any history of violence inflicting on themselves or others. I think that we could never understand why people respond or react the way that they do in those extreme circumstances.
If we're talking about this final episode, it comes at a huge cost for Candy, with or without prison, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in the way of not letting her off the hook is that her life will be forever changed. And I don't know, there's part of me that would do takes. I would take opportunities at later takes to create like a window into her fooling everyone, potentially. Maybe there are thoughts that she has where she's like, I fucking did it. Yeah. I did it. And feeling satisfied or whatever that is. These are also just details for me where I just feel like, maybe there's a piece of her. Maybe I am taking this all to heart and I'm defending her too much. And maybe I need to have her look at these people and smirk because she fooled them all. Maybe that's what they need. And not because it's coming from notes, but because it's it's just coming from a place where I just feel like we have to have that option, because maybe that was a truth.
Oh my, the way you do that, I think really well is in the hypnosis scenes.
I spoke to a woman who hypnotizes people for therapy. Yeah, because I was like, this can't be real. And so like I did she hypnotized me or whatever. We did a session together.
As you, Elizabeth, or
yes.
as you being Candy?
No, it's me. And I'm trying to figure out like, what is this? And it really, honestly, is just guided meditation, and you're choosing to go along with the voice. And maybe it's because I didn't get into a full state of hypnosis or whatever that means. But to me, I couldn't quite make that leap. And I'm a very practical, rational, not so woo-woo person. And I think Candy is too. So I think she is going with it because she knows it's going to help her.
Right. Now, you've had a lot of time to think about why, especially because you had to do a very, very physical scene in like the killing of a character.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever think about in the end what this why was? Because I don't think it was about Alan.
No, I think it's about two women who would they just didn't agree with how either of them chose to live their life. And I do think I think Evidence of Love really kind of puts it together in the end.
At the end of the book, Evidence of Love, where the authors Jim Atkinson and John Bloom compare Candy and Betty to Greek mythological goddesses Hera and Aphrodite.
Yes.
They say it much better in the book, but the gist of it is Hera represents motherhood, that's Betty. Aphrodite represents sensuality and love, that's Candy.
Yes, and that they will forever be at odds with each other, these prototypes. And whatever happened in that house, their differences fueled them in a way that I think is only like primal. But I think reading that when I did before we started filming, that was, it's a leap, it's a choice, it's an extrapolation. And also, it's kind of philosophically like beautiful in some weird way to try and put like mythology to it. And so it's kind of satisfying to be like, to see it buttoned up that way. And so there's that, but then there's also, you just try to fucking kill me and I'm going to kill you, or I don't know. I'm not just going to hurt you, but I'm going to finish is what happens.
Yeah.
There's no world where this is about us both healing wounds afterwards. She leaves the house and she gets in the car and then she goes to her house. I just imagined her breath the whole time being like the only thing she can really hear.
It's funny because that's the one time where she goes to turn on the radio and then she's like,
yeah.
Candy's relationship with pop music
Yeah.
is fascinating. And the way that you like visually render that relationship is it's fun isn't the right word. It's really informative. It's like a moral compass or something.
Yeah, there's a way to like either her pumping herself up, her feeling herself, or her using it as a distraction. There's her almost like seducing herself to it. Like there's lots of ways that she uses listening to music that when she's in the car and the music comes on, and it's my Sharona, I think.
Yeah.
And it's just chaos sounds. Like it's violent. Yeah.
Yep. I'll never hear ABBA's Take a Chance on Me ever in the same way. I will always think of your head bobbing back and forth and this like really manic, like harder, like I used to love that song. I think I have the reverse thing happen, Elizabeth Olsen.
I love that song.
I used to love that
more.
song, and now it's just like it's like a really intense moment.
It's like she is going to her lawyer's house and she's about to tell him that she did it. Like, there's no world where she is just enjoying this song. She is processing. Like, there is something pent up. She's really debating whether or not she's going to say this for the first fucking time. It's a huge deal. Like, this song is so like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's so intense. So yeah, her relationship to music, I felt like, was a good way to, an opportunity as an actor to have some sort of insight into where she is in her alone time.
Okay, I have to ask. In the end, are you hoping people might feel one way or another about your character, about Candy Montgomery?
I think I'm never the actor who's like, this is what I hope people get from this, or this is what, because I don't have moral reasons of saying yes to certain projects. And so whether or not these people were real or wrong or right, I just want to understand people who make decisions that I don't think I would make, but I want to empathize and understand people that I disagree with. Like, that's kind of how I try and like function in the world. There's so many like political things that I feel strongly about that I don't really vocalize my beliefs or whatever in a public way. But if you're at my house, we're talking about it. And so if I create a safe enough space where I can have someone disagree with me, where they feel safe enough where they could disagree with me, or a relationship where people are like feeling like brave enough to disagree with someone in an intimate space, I sometimes catch myself having like extreme judgment for a couple weeks after or whatever. And then I'm like, God, but they're my friend and they have a point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want things. I think there's sometimes where you draw a line if it's like, I think there are times when we have to like draw a line and a boundary with people in our lives because of huge disagreements. But I would like to think that we can still be civil and kind in a human level and disagree about politics or certain or religion or whatever it is. And so that's kind of how I see all the characters I choose to play, but definitely Candy is just don't come in with like vitriol, but like come in with I don't know, trying to think, well, God, I guess I don't understand why people make the decisions they make, but I shouldn't go through my life just hating or whatever.
So this sounds to me like a public call to action from Elizabeth Olsen that you can debate what happens with Candy Montgomery's verdict, and you can still be friends.
Yeah.
You can still sit at the dinner table together, and we can disagree over whether or not the not guilty and the self-defense and the weird combination of temporary insanity and all that stuff. Even if it doesn't make entire sense to the person across the dinner table from you, you can still have a civil conversation about a very complicated character.
Yeah. I also, I love old school academia. I love a debate.
Right.
I think they're really important for us to have. And all for us to get offended and annoyed. And then also maybe find a third thing that we didn't think of before, that we're like, yeah, I guess we can meet on this level.
Yeah.
This third other thing. I don't know. So that's kind of how I feel when people ask, what do you want them to get from the show? I don't know. Just maybe try and allow yourself to be surprised by other people's experiences and listen to them and not jump to judgment.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth Olsen, for helping us put the end to a fantastic, fantastic series. It's been great. I really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, I really love that we've been able to do this entire podcast, and I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Thanks again, Elizabeth Olsen, for speaking with us and for your brilliant performance. Now it's time to close our eyes and focus on this final installment of Only in Texas, where Texas Monthly executive editor Michael Hall talks about the use of hypnosis in Candy's trial and why this technique and other pseudoscience is still admissible in Texas courts to this day. Welcome back, Michael Hall, to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's great to be here.
All right, here we are, episode 7. And we have found out the verdict. And the verdict is not guilty. Much of this episode is Candy Montgomery taking the stand. And she sort of tells her version of the story. And what we have here is what we'll call, there in the OJ case, it was if the glove don't fit, acquit. In the Candy case, it's shh, and it's that shushing sound. We talked a little bit about that with you in episode 6, but let's talk about what that means. What do they say shh means?
Well, according to the psychiatrist, Fred Faison, when Betty shushed Candy, it took her back to being a little girl, to a particularly traumatizing moment when her mother shushed her in the emergency room at the hospital, where Candy was crying because she was really upset because she had gotten cut with some glass. And that shushing traumatized her and made her really mad at her mother. And this rage, 30 years later, comes exploding out of her. And with all the other things going on with her and Betty at that moment, it put her into basically a fugue state where she just started axing her friend to death.
Which brings us to hypnosis, which is one type of evidence-gathering technique that was considered science-based, I guess, back then. When did hypnosis become part of how one might utilize it in a case?
Well, hypnosis had been used in court cases since World War II and on through the 40s and 50s and 60s. And it was, there were a lot of things that were used in court cases that were considered scientific. And nobody really batted an eye at anything, from bite mark testimony to arson testimony to blood spatter evidence.
Yeah.
If an expert got up in court and testified about these things, it generally worked. And many people were sent to prison who were innocent because of what we now call junk science. Back then, we didn't call it junk science. Back then, we just called it forensic science.
Well, and it's worth noting here that you and your Texas Monthly colleagues have done incredible work in exposing some of the pseudoscience. Now, what about hypnosis? Was the idea there that, your subconscious is locked and a psychiatrist could liberate your subconscious and get you to reveal the truth?
Yeah, hypnosis is a device by which a therapist can help somebody basically relax and deal with all kinds of traumas, from having a hard time dealing with your mother to having a hard time quitting smoking. It's a way to make a person relax enough to have the therapist suggest things to you and help you deal with these traumas. What forensic hypnosis does is the idea that you can make somebody relax enough that they can look back on something, some event, and recall what happened. Something in a crime, for example, recall details of a crime, and that you can pull these things out from the relaxed mind. The problem is that the very thing that makes hypnosis very helpful in therapy, the suggestibility of the subject, can lead to all kinds of problems when you get in the courtroom, where somebody has suggested some things to the subject that didn't really happen. And so we've had hypnosis where people have said things that didn't actually happen. And it turns out that hypnosis is not a very reliable way to figure out exactly what happened, because the brain is not like a tape recorder. Some people can be hypnotized, some people can't. It's just a very arbitrary and very subjective thing. So back then, there weren't any questions about it. Today, there are many questions about it. 21 different states do not allow hypnosis in hypnotized witnesses to give any kind of testimony in court. In Texas, they do.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to follow certain rules. But a lot of states just don't allow it because they find it too arbitrary, too subjective.
Arson science, bite marks, and hypnosis. Are all these still submissible in the Texas Court of Law?
Yes, they are. Texas has something called the Texas Forensic Science Commission. We're the only state that has anything with this kind of authority. We've had it for quite a while now, and they held hearings on bite mark testimony, and their ultimate conclusion was it should not be used. You can use blood spatter testimony. You can use hypnosis. Arson science has changed a lot because of all kinds of scandals over the years. Nowadays, arson science, like pour patterns and things like that, we now know what really causes those things. And so forensic science is much better in many ways. But we still allow some of these things, like hypnosis, in the courts.
Did Robert Udishin, I know you spoke with him, did he say, or maybe you can give your perspective, where does Candy Montgomery's case fall in the scope of his legacy?
Oh, I think he's very proud of it. He's very proud that they were able to get a not guilty verdict in a hostile environment with a hostile judge, with hostile media. I mean, everybody was against Candy Montgomery, and they pulled it off. Robert was the one who had the ammunition, Robert and Elaine, and gave it to Don, and then Don just, slammed it home. I know that Don was very proud of it. Don, I've read things that he saw it as the high point of his legal career.
All right, well, so no one knows how to play better to the jury than Don Crowder. And I want to spend some time on Don Crowder because most of us have no idea who he is till we get into this show, and over time, he kind of becomes a favorite character for us. Let's talk about the real-life Don Crowder. What did this... We know the outcome of the case. We know that, he wins. What happens next?
Well, this case it's over 1980,
1980, mm-hmm.
And, Don Crowder's on top of the world. He's just won the unwinnable case against everybody. He became the city attorney in Allen, which is another little bitty town up there, which a post he held for 22 years, I believe.
Oh.
A few years later, 5 years later, he runs for governor. Don really believed in himself, and he thought he was going nowhere but up. A few years after that, he had kids, he was married, had this great legal career, and then things started to go the other way.
So Don Crowder, we find out at the end of this episode that in 1998 he takes his own life. What happened?
Well, he had been doing so well. He'd gotten into politics. He was the city attorney in Allen. He had started a popular sports bar, and then in the mid-90s, the sports bar started hitting some financial trouble. He and his wife started drifting apart, and they wound up divorcing. His brother, apparently, who had problems with alcohol, got a DWI and then killed himself in this totally reckless moment. And, he wasn't the guy he used to be. He wasn't on top of the world anymore. He tried to kill himself in October. He took a bunch of pills, I believe. That didn't work. And so in November, he did it again, this time with a gun. This time he was successful. I think he's remembered for the Candy Montgomery case. As he should be. What he pulled out in his kind of over-the-top way is phenomenal. You have to keep in mind, Don was a civil lawyer, and here he was winning one of the biggest criminal cases of the decade. That's a pretty big deal. He couldn't have done it without his buddy Robert Udishin and Elaine Carpenter, and yet still, that's pretty amazing. So yes, the last 20 years of his life weren't so resounding, but it's pretty amazing what he did with Candy Montgomery.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Michael Hall. It's been great having you on the Love and Death podcast.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you again for joining us on the official Love and Death podcast. And thanks to David E. Kelly, Lesli Linka Glatter, Elizabeth Olsen, and the entire Love and Death production for bringing humanity and depth to this story. If you still want to know more about this case, I strongly recommend you read the original 1984 feature published by Texas Monthly, which is now on their website. Head to texasmonthly.com/loveanddeath. And if you liked this podcast, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Our executive producers are Maddie Builder and Aaron Kubatsky. The podcast is also written and produced by me, Nancy Miller. Brian Standifer is our audio engineer, editor, and mixer. Music is courtesy of Warner Media and Brian Standifer. Special thanks to David Ertzua and the team at Studio Awesome. Watch Love and Death, now streaming on Max.